I can still smell the roasted lamb and fresh wine. I can still hear the laughter and music from that night. And yes, I still feel that sharp pain in my chest when I saw my father placing our family ring on my younger brother's finger. My name is Ethan. In the parable, I'm known simply as the older son, or the faithful brother. But I have a story too, one that my brother never told you, one that even my father never fully understood. 20 years have passed since my brother Jacob's return. 20 years in which I've learned, grown, and understood what love and forgiveness truly mean. But getting here wasn't easy, and perhaps, if I tell you my story, you'll better understand what it means to live in the shadow of mercy. I was born during the 3rd census of Emperor Augustus. I was the first son of Abraham, a respected farmer with vast lands on the edge of Galilee. My mother died bringing me into this world. My father didn't remarry until 4 years later, when Jacob, my younger brother, was born. From childhood, I understood the responsibility that came with my position. I was the heir. I was the one who had to carry on the family name, learn my father's business, care for the property. At 7 years old, when other children were still playing in the dusty streets, I was already learning to read scrolls with contracts and count sheep. My father was a good man, fair, generous, respected in the community. He woke before everyone, and was the last to go to bed. His hands, hardened by work, seemed to know exactly when a vine needed more water or when a sheep was sick. I admired him deeply, and all I wanted was to be like him. Jacob, my brother, was different. Raised by his stepmother, who spoiled and overprotected him, he was a handsome, charismatic, but unstable child. While I spent hours alongside my father, learning how to count the harvest and negotiate with merchants, Jacob ran over the hills, made up stories, charmed the village girls with his bright smile. Everyone loved Jacob. It was impossible not to. Even I, who often felt the burden of comparison, couldn't help but laugh at his jokes or be carried away by his contagious enthusiasm. But as we grew older, the differences between us became more evident, more problematic. At 16, I was already running part of my father's business. At the same age, Jacob was known for his nights of drinking in the village taverns and his adventures with the daughters of merchants passing through the area. "Why don't you discipline him?" I asked my father one day after Jacob had come home, at dawn, smelling of wine and women's perfume. "Why do you allow him to shame our family name?" My father sighed, his eyes tired but full of a love I didn't understand at the time. "Jacob's heart is like a wild horse, Ethan. If you try to fence him in too much, he'll rebel even harder. We need to give him time to find his way." I disagreed, but said nothing. I continued to work, to be the perfect son, hoping that one day my brother would learn responsibility or that my father would finally see the difference between us. But things didn't improve. At 20, I was already engaged to Hannah, the daughter of a respectable man from the village. We were planning our wedding, our future, the house we would build on my father's property. My life was clearly mapped out, like a well-trodden path, leading to a secure future. Jacob, at 16, had become even more rebellious, more restless. The village adventures no longer satisfied him. He always talked about the great cities, Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria, Rome, about the glamorous life he imagined there, about the freedom he dreamed of. And then, one evening, it happened. Our family was having dinner together. My father, Jacob, me, and Hannah, my fiancée. We were talking about the olive harvest that promised to be bountiful, about preparations for our wedding. Jacob was unusually quiet. Then, suddenly, he put his cup on the table and said, "Father, I want my share of the inheritance. Now." Hannah's cup fell from her hand, shattering on the floor. I was struck dumb with shock and anger. What my brother was saying was unthinkable. To ask for inheritance before your father's death was like saying, As far as I'm concerned, you're already dead. I expected my father to rebuke him, to finally discipline him. Instead, I saw how his eyes filled with a deep sadness. He remained silent for a long time, looking at his younger son as if trying to memorize every feature of his face. Then, to my amazement, he simply said, "Very well, son. I will divide the property between you and your brother." I couldn't believe it. I wanted to protest, to remind my father of all the times Jacob had disappointed us, of all the responsibilities I carried while my brother wasted his time and talents. But something in my father's expression stopped me. There was pain there, but also acceptance, an understanding that was beyond me. In the days that followed, my father sold part of the land and sheep to give Jacob his share of the inheritance in coins. I received the deeds for the rest of the property, although my father would continue to manage it as long as he lived. Jacob was overjoyed. He bought new clothes, a fine horse, and began making plans for his journey to the far country he always talked about. I heard him talking with his friends about the pleasures awaiting him, about the life he would finally live, without the rules and limitations of family. I remember that last morning. My father woke before sunrise and sat on the porch of the house, looking toward the road that led west. He knew that on that day, Jacob would leave. When my brother came out of the house with his bags full of money and clothes, my father didn't try to stop him. He embraced him tightly, gave him his blessing, and whispered something in his ear. I don't know what he said, but I saw how, for a moment, Jacob's eyes filled with tears. Then, as if ashamed of that moment of weakness, he smiled broadly, mounted his horse, and rode away without looking back. My father remained there, watching the road long after Jacob had disappeared from sight. When he finally returned to the house, he seemed 10 years older. I wanted to console him, to tell him that Jacob didn't deserve his pain, that he would waste all his money and end up in misery. But I couldn't speak the words. Instead, I said, "You still have me, Father. I will never leave you." He smiled sadly and put his hand on my shoulder. "I know, Ethan. You're a good son, the best son a father could wish for." It was what I had wanted, to hear all my life. And yet, somehow, the words sounded hollow, as if the compliment was less valuable because it was given in my brother's absence. Life went on. I married Hannah. We built a house near my father's. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, whom we raised in the new faith. I told them countless times about Jesus, about his miracles, about his teachings. But Jacob's presence was like a ghost haunting our house. Every evening, my father would sit on the porch looking toward the western road. At every holiday, he would set an extra place at the table, as if expecting his prodigal son to appear at any moment. Friends and family tried to convince him to accept that Jacob would probably never return, but he refused to listen. Meanwhile, news about my brother reached us from time to time, through merchants or travelers passing through the area. Jacob had been seen in Jerusalem, then in Antioch, spending money on women and extravagant parties. Some said he presented himself as the son of a wealthy landowner, others that he claimed to be a jewelry merchant. Each piece of news was like a knife in my father's heart, though he tried not to show it. I saw how he aged faster than he should have, how the joy in his eyes gradually faded. And during all this time, I was there, the faithful son, the one who had never left, the one who worked from morning until night to maintain and even increase the family wealth. But sometimes, on long summer nights, I would wake up next to Hannah and wonder, is it possible that my father loves Jacob more than me? Is it possible that his very rebellion, the disappointments he caused, make him more precious in our Father's eyes? What could I, the perfect son, do to receive the same longing gaze, the same intensity of feelings? After almost 3 years since Jacob's departure, a severe famine hit the country. Crops were poor, many animals died. Due to my prudence and management skills, our family survived better than many others. We had sufficient provisions and were even able to help some of our neighbors. I remember how, on a particularly harsh evening, when the dry wind was blowing from the desert and the sky was dark, without stars, my father looked at me at dinner and said, "I wonder if Jacob has enough to eat tonight." And I cared, I really did, despite my anger, despite my resentments, despite everything. He was my brother. We had grown up together. I remember how he taught me to catch frogs at the river, how we laughed together as children. But I couldn't help feeling that shadow of bitterness. "He would have enough to eat if he had stayed home," I replied. "He would have enough to eat if he hadn't wasted his inheritance on vain pleasures." My father didn't respond. He continued to eat in silence, but I knew my words had hurt him, and part of me was glad about that, though I immediately felt guilty for this feeling. Then, one day, when no one expected it anymore, it happened. I was in the field, supervising the workers harvesting wheat. It was a hot day, and I had been working since sunrise. My clothes were sticking to my body because of sweat, my skin sunburned. I saw Gad, one of the younger servants of the house, running toward me. "Master Ethan," he shouted, "come quickly, your father, your brother." I felt my heart stop. My first thought was that my father had died, that he had had an attack while seeing Jacob returning. I left everything and started running toward the house, praying in my mind. "Please, Lord, don't take my father. Not yet. Not like this." But when I reached the property, I saw something I didn't expect. My father was alive, running. An old man who could barely walk lately. And he was running toward a distant figure on the road. A pitiful figure dressed in rags. Jacob. I stopped at the edge of the road, watching the scene unfolding before me. My father had reached Jacob and embraced him with surprising strength for his age. Jacob had fallen to his knees, his face hidden in my father's tunic. Even from a distance, I could see how his shoulders were shaking from crying. I stood there, unable to move, while my father helped my brother to stand and led him toward the house, supporting him like an invalid. Jacob was unrecognizable, thin, dirty, with tangled hair and an unkempt beard. His clothes, once expensive, were now rags. And yet, my father held him as if he were the most precious thing in the world. I took a deep breath and headed toward the house. I had to see, to understand what was happening. When I arrived, the courtyard was in turmoil. My father was giving orders left and right with an energy I hadn't seen in him for years. "Bring the best robe for my son. Bring the family ring for his finger. Prepare the fattened calf. Today we will celebrate." Jacob stood there, overwhelmed, trying to say something, but my father wouldn't give him the chance. He was too busy organizing the biggest celebration our household had seen in years. I approached them, and Jacob raised his eyes. In his eyes, I saw shame, remorse, but also a glimmer of hope. My father turned to me, radiating with happiness. "Ethan, your brother has returned. My son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." I didn't know what to say. The deepest part of me wanted to rejoice, to share my father's happiness, to embrace the brother I hadn't seen for so long. But another part, the part that had worked tirelessly all these years, the part that had borne my father's pain, the part that had never left home, felt a growing anger. "Welcome back, brother," I said with a voice that sounded foreign even to me. I didn't embrace him. I didn't move closer. I stood there, rigid, unable to overcome the wall of resentments that had risen within me. Jacob swallowed hard and nodded, understanding. My father looked between us, but he was too happy to notice the tension. He continued to give orders, and the servants began preparations for the feast. I returned to the field. I needed to finish the work, to put my thoughts in order. But my concentration was gone. All I could see was the expression of absolute happiness on my father's face, a happiness that I, the faithful son, had never managed to bring him, despite all my efforts. The hours passed, the sun began to set, and I was still in the field, working mechanically, trying to suppress my anger and pain. Then I heard the music and laughter coming from the house. The party had begun. I finished the work and headed home, walking slowly, reluctantly. As I approached, the music grew louder, the laughter clearer. I could smell roasted lamb and fresh bread. When I reached the house, I stopped. Through the open door, I could see the scene inside. My father sat at the head of the table, radiating with joy. Next to him, Jacob, cleaned up, dressed in the finest clothes with the family ring gleaming on his finger. Friends, neighbors, relatives, all gathered to celebrate the return of the prodigal son. And none of them had noticed that I, the faithful son, wasn't even present. One of the servants came out and saw me standing there. "Master Ethan," he said, "everyone is waiting for you. Come celebrate your brother's return." "What's there to celebrate?" I asked, feeling anger rising in my throat like bile. The fact that my brother squandered his wealth on prostitutes and now has come home because he was hungry? Is that why my father killed the fattened calf? The servant looked shocked at the bitterness in my voice. He bowed his head and retreated, probably to tell my father about my attitude. And indeed, after a short while, I saw my father coming out of the house looking for me. When he saw me, his face lit up with relief, but he immediately noticed my dark expression. "Ethan, my son," he said, approaching. "Why are you standing out here? Come inside. Your brother has returned. It's time to celebrate." I felt all the frustration, all the resentment accumulated over years exploding inside me. "Look, Father," I said with a voice trembling with emotion. "All these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." The words came out of me like poisoned arrows, meant to hurt. And I saw the pain in my father's eyes. But there was something else there too, a deep understanding, a compassion that made me feel small and selfish. He came closer and put his hands on my shoulders, looking deep into my eyes. "My son," he said with a gentleness that disarmed me, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." A few moments of silence passed between us. I could hear the music and laughter from the house, the smell of good food wafting in the night air, and I felt something breaking inside me, a barrier, a wall that had kept me captive in my own perceived injustice. My father was looking at me, waiting. He wasn't forcing me to enter, wasn't judging me for my feelings. He was giving me the freedom to choose, just as he had given Jacob, the freedom to leave. "Come, son," he said again, extending his hand to me. "Our family is whole again. Let's rejoice together." What happened that night changed the course of my life. It wasn't an instantaneous transformation, wasn't a moment of divine revelation. It was the beginning of a long and difficult struggle with my own feelings, with my own understanding of what love and forgiveness mean. I finally entered the house. I saw the expression of amazement and gratitude on Jacob's face when he saw me approaching. We didn't embrace that night. The wound was still too fresh, the distance too great. But we sat at the same table, ate from the same fattened calf, drank from the same wine. And slowly, as the night progressed and the stories flowed, Jacob telling about his adventures and disappointments in the far country, me sharing happenings from the household he had missed, I felt a bridge beginning to be built across the chasm between us. Later that night, when most of the guests had left and the house had quieted down, I went out onto the porch to get some fresh air. Jacob was there looking at the stars. We sat together in silence, listening to the crickets and looking at the full moon illuminating our father's fields. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said finally. "Not just for leaving, but for everything. For being a bad brother, for being a bad son, for taking everything for granted while you work from sunrise to sunset. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I probably don't even want it. But I want you to know that I admire you. I always have." I looked at him, surprised. In all the years of our childhood, with all the differences between us, it would never have crossed my mind that Jacob admired me. He was the bright one, the charismatic one, the one everyone instinctively liked. "Why would you admire me?" I asked. "I'm just me. Boring, responsible Ethan." He smiled sadly. "Because you know who you are. Because you never needed to run away to find yourself. Because you have the strength to stay, to take on responsibilities, to build something lasting. I ran away looking for freedom and found only a new form of slavery." "What happened out there, Jacob?" I asked, curiosity finally overcoming resentment. "In the far country. What was it like?" Jacob remained silent for a moment, looking into the distance as if seeing again the places he had left behind. "At first, it was wonderful," he said with a mixture of nostalgia and bitterness in his voice. "I arrived in Antioch with pockets full of money, young, free, with no one to tell me what to do. I stayed in the best part of the city, bought expensive clothes, fast horses. Every night I was at parties, surrounded by so-called friends and beautiful women who laughed at all my jokes." He paused, taking the wine cup next to him and taking a long sip. "But you know what's strange about freedom, Ethan? It turns into addiction. Each pleasure becomes less satisfying than the one before. Each drink has to be stronger, each bet bigger, each relationship more intense. And one day you wake up and realize you can't feel anything without excess, that you're a captive to your own desires." "And then the money ran out," I said, more of a statement than a question. "Yes, the money ran out. Faster than I ever could have imagined. One night, I lost a huge sum in gambling. I was drunk, confident, sure my luck would return. But it didn't, and suddenly, all those friends, all those women who found me so charming, disappeared, as if I had never existed." He lowered his head, a gesture of shame I would not have thought possible in my brother, always so proud and self-assured. I tried to find work, of course, but what did I know how to do? All my life I had been just Abraham's son. I had no trade, no skills. Nobody wanted to hire a spoiled Jew who only knew how to spend money and tell stories. "And the famine hit," I added, beginning to see the complete picture. "Yes, the famine. It was terrible, Ethan. People dying in the streets, children crying from hunger, and I, having sunk so low that I hired myself out to a pig farmer. A Jew feeding pigs, creatures we had been taught all our lives to consider unclean. You can't imagine the humiliation." "I think I can imagine," I said slowly, thinking of my own moments of humiliation, moments when I felt that our father preferred my brother, moments when my efforts seemed unnoticed. I was so hungry that I longed for the pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave me anything. One night, sitting in the pig pen, wet and freezing, I remembered our father's house, the servants who always had plenty of food, the warmth of the house, the safety. He swallowed hard, emotion choking his voice. And I realized what an immense mistake I had made. Not only had I squandered my inheritance, but I had hurt our father in an unforgivable way. I told him, basically, that I preferred his money to his presence, that his death would be more valuable to me than his life. Tears were now flowing freely down his face, and I was surprised to feel that my eyes were also wet. I told myself that I didn't deserve to be called his son anymore, that all I could hope for was to be received as one of his hired servants. So I came home, rehearsing in my mind what I would say to him. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." "But he saw you from a distance," I continued, imagining the scene I hadn't witnessed, "and he ran to meet you." "Yes," said Jacob with a trace of amazement in his voice, as if even after all these hours he couldn't believe what had happened. "He saw me when I was still a long way off, an old man running. Ethan, do you have any idea how unusual that is? A man of our father's age and position doesn't run. It's undignified. And yet he ran, like a young man, as if nothing else mattered in that moment except to get to me as quickly as possible. And then he embraced you," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "He embraced me. He kissed me. He didn't let me finish the speech I had rehearsed. Instead, he called to the servants to bring the best robe, the ring, sandals for my wounded feet. And he ordered the fattened calf to be killed for a feast. Ethan, I still can't understand it. What kind of father does that? What kind of love is this?" We sat in silence, contemplating this question that seemed to underlie our entire story. What kind of love was this indeed? A love that didn't consider merit, justice, what was proper. A love that surpassed any human conception of fairness. "I don't know," I said finally, "but I want to learn. I want to learn to love the way our Father loves." Weeks passed, then months. Jacob began working on the estate, at first doing the most menial tasks, refusing any preferential treatment. Slowly, he regained his place in the community, not as the prodigal son, but as a man who had learned his lessons and was willing to work to rebuild his life. Our relationship healed gradually. There were moments of tension, days when old resentments surfaced, but there were also moments of authentic connection, long conversations about life, about mistakes, about the lessons we had both learned. One day, as we were working together, in our father's vineyard, Jacob suddenly stopped and looked at me. "Ethan," he said, "have you ever wondered why our father didn't come after me? Why he let me leave, knowing what would happen?" It was a question I had thought about many times myself. Why our father, who obviously loved his prodigal son with an unmeasured love, had let him go toward destruction. I think he understood that. "You had to leave," I answered slowly. "That you had to discover for yourself what he was trying to teach you. That true love sometimes means giving freedom, even the freedom to make mistakes." "Yes," Jacob nodded, "and I wonder if that's not the lesson I had to learn too. That true freedom doesn't mean the absence of limits or responsibilities. It means choosing to do what is right, even when you have the option to do otherwise." Our father lived to see us both married, to hold his grandchildren in his arms. He died on a mild autumn day in his sleep, at peace and happy that his family was whole again. That was 20 years ago. Jacob and I now run the estate together, each contributing his talents and strengths. Our children grow up together, as we did, but I hope without the tensions and comparisons that marked our childhood. And every year, on the day of Jacob's return, we kill a calf and celebrate. Not just his return, but my transformation too. Because you see, I learned something profound from this whole experience, that forgiveness is not just a gift we offer to others, but also a gift we give to ourselves. For years, I lived in the shadow of resentment, believing that justice meant everyone getting exactly what they deserve, that my Father's love should be distributed exactly in proportion to our obedience and work. But my Father taught me a different lesson, that true love is not based on merit, that grace, this wonderful and scandalous concept, means receiving what you don't deserve, and that joy is not a limited cake to be divided, but a spring that multiplies the more you drink from it. I often think about that night, standing in front of the house, refusing to enter the party, how close I was to missing everything because of my wounded pride, my need to be recognized, appreciated, how easily we could have remained separated, Jacob inside the house, receiving our father's forgiveness, and me outside, self-crucified on the cross of my own righteousness. It wasn't easy to give up that sense of moral superiority, to accept that, despite all my virtues, all my sacrifices, I needed forgiveness just as much as my prodigal brother. That perhaps my sin, pride, judgment, resentment, was just as serious as Jacob's sins. I gradually discovered that, although I was the son who stayed home, I too was lost in my own way, lost in my own expectations, in my own rigid conception of justice, in my inability to see the amazing gift that had been offered to me, my Father's constant presence. "Everything I have is yours," my father had said, and it was true. All those years I could have enjoyed the riches of the house, his love, communion, but I chose to live as a servant, not as a son, always measuring what I gave and what I received, always seeking recognition for my fidelity. The truth is that on that night, I needed the party just as much as my brother did. He needed to celebrate his return home. I needed to celebrate my release from the resentment that had consumed me for years. If this story sounds familiar to you, it's no wonder. Rabbi Jesus of Nazareth told it much better than I ever could, and sometimes I wonder if he might have known our family, if he might have heard our story in his travels through Galilee, or perhaps he understood something universal about human nature, about the relationship between parents and children, about the nature of divine love. But what he didn't tell, because it wasn't relevant to the lesson he was trying to convey, is what happened afterward. How two such different brothers learned to live together again. How a wise father healed not just the heart of the prodigal son, but also the wounded soul of the faithful son. That's the part of the story I want to tell you, because perhaps you recognize yourself in it. Perhaps you are like Jacob, seeking freedom in the wrong places, wasting the precious gifts of your life, fearing you've gone too far to be forgiven. Or perhaps you are like me, doing everything right, following the rules, but feeling unrecognized, unappreciated, always compared to others. In the years following Jacob's return, I went through a slow but profound transformation. It was a painful process, full of moments when old thinking habits, old resentments surfaced. But my father was patient with me, just as he had been patient with my brother. I remember one day, a few months after Jacob's return. We were working together in the field, harvesting wheat, when a neighbor passed by. "Look at the prodigal son," he said, pointing at Jacob with a mixture of amusement and contempt in his voice. "Is your father glad you're back, boy?" I saw Jacob's face darken with shame, and, to my surprise, I felt my own anger rising, not against my brother, but against the neighbor who dared to judge him. "He is not the prodigal son," I said, putting down my sickle and turning toward the neighbor. "He is my brother, Jacob, son of Abraham, and yes, our father is glad he's back. So am I." The neighbor seemed surprised by my vehemence. He nodded, embarrassed, and continued on his way. When I turned back to Jacob, I saw tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Ethan," he said simply. It was a small but significant moment. For the first time, I had defended my brother in front of others, publicly acknowledging him not as the prodigal son, but as a member of our family, as someone who deserved respect and dignity. There were more difficult moments too. One day, we were preparing for the Harvest Festival. There was a lot of work to be done, and Jacob, although hardworking and dedicated, still didn't have my stamina and experience in the field. He retired early, exhausted, leaving me to finish alone. I felt the old resentment rising in me. There he is, I thought, still preferring comfort over hard work. When I entered the house, late at night, I found the table set, the food warm, and Jacob waiting for me. "I figured I'd be more useful here," he said, seeing my surprised expression. "I know I can't work in the field as well as you, but I can do this." That night, the roles were reversed. I, the son who had always worked the hardest, was being served by my brother. It was a lesson in humility, but also in discovering how our different gifts and talents could complement rather than compete. Gradually, we began to see value in our differences. Jacob, with his charisma and social skills, excelled in negotiations, with merchants, in establishing new trade relationships. I, with my meticulousness and agricultural knowledge, ensured that our harvests were abundant and of quality. Our father watched this transformation with quiet joy. One evening, as the three of us sat on the porch looking at the stars, he said, "Do you know what makes me happiest? Seeing you working together. Seeing how each of you brings your unique gifts to our family. It's exactly what I've always wanted." I looked at him surprised. Even when Jacob left? Even when I refused to come to the party? He smiled with that gentle wisdom that characterized him. Even then, because I knew you both needed to travel these roads to get here. Jacob needed to leave to understand the value of home. You needed to confront your own pride to discover the true nature of love. "But why didn't you tell us that?" Jacob asked. "Why didn't you stop me from leaving? Why didn't you force Ethan to come to the party?" "Because true love never forces," our father answered, looking into the distance. "It offers freedom. The freedom to choose, to make mistakes, to return. If I had imposed my will on you, you would have learned only obedience, not love." These words have followed me for years. I thought about them when my first son was born, when I watched him growing, making his own choices, his own mistakes. I thought about them every time I was tempted to impose or control, instead of love and accept. After our father's death, the relationship between me and Jacob deepened even more. It was no longer about competition or comparison, but about honoring the legacy he had left us, a legacy of unconditional love, of acceptance, of true communion. I learned to recognize that, although I physically remained in my father's house, spiritually I had been just as far away as my brother, that my pride, my need to be seen as the good one, had separated me from the true essence of family life, the gift of being loved not for what you do, but for who you are. And Jacob learned that true freedom doesn't mean the absence of limits or responsibilities, but the capacity to consciously choose love, even when it's difficult, even when it involves sacrifice. Sometimes, when I look at our children playing together, I see echoes of our brotherly relationship in them. I see the small rivalries, the comparisons, the tensions, but I also see something different, an acceptance of differences, a joy in complementarity, a love that doesn't depend on performance or merit. And I wonder if this isn't the most important legacy we can leave them. The understanding that in a true family, be it of blood or of spirit, there is no good son and bad son. There is no deserving one and undeserving one. There are only loved children, each with his own path, each with his gifts, each with his role in the larger story of the family. Perhaps if we embrace this understanding, we will no longer need to be the prodigal son or the faithful son. We can simply be sons and daughters, accepted, loved, home. And perhaps that's the true wisdom of the parable that Rabbi Jesus told, that in our Heavenly Father's heart, there is room for everyone, for those who wander far and for those who stay, for those who make spectacular mistakes and for those who make subtle ones, for those who squander their gifts and for those who bury them out of fear. We are all invited to the same table. We are all called to the same party. The only question is, will we choose to enter? For years, I believed the story was about my brother, about how he left, how he failed, how he returned. But now I understand that the story was just as much about me, about how I physically stayed home but emotionally drifted away, about how I confused work with love, obedience with relationship. Perhaps each of us has both the prodigal son and the faithful son within us. parts that want to run, to experience, to risk, even at the cost of mistake, and parts that want to follow the rules, to be good, to earn approval, even at the cost of joy. The real challenge is to integrate these parts, to be both adventurous and responsible, both free and committed, to learn from both Jacob's mistakes and mine. I remember a conversation I had with Jacob many years after his return. We were sitting on the same porch where our father used to watch the sunset, waiting for him. "Do you think Father loved us equally?" I asked, a question that had haunted me for years. Jacob remained silent for a long time, contemplating. "I think," he said finally, "that he loved us uniquely. Not equally, in the sense of identically, but completely. He loved you for your loyalty, your dedication, your strength. He loved me for my spirit, my capacity to dream, even for my vulnerabilities. But the intensity of love? I think it was the same. And yet," I said, "for you, he killed the fattened calf. For you, he threw a party." "Yes," he nodded. "Because I was the one who needed that visible, public reaffirmation. You had the security of his daily presence. I needed the grand gesture to believe in his love again. Not because he loved me more, but because he knew exactly what each of us needed." I reflected on his words, feeling a new perspective opening up. Perhaps this was the key to understanding, that true love doesn't offer everyone the same thing, but offers each one exactly what they need. In all those years when I felt unappreciated, perhaps my father was offering me exactly what I needed: stability, trust, responsibility. And in all those favors I thought he was doing for Jacob, perhaps he was offering exactly what he needed: visible forgiveness, reaffirmation, a way back. This is the understanding that transformed my own parenting. Each of my children has different needs. Some need structure and clear boundaries. Others need space to explore and discover. Some need constant encouragement. Others need challenges to grow. To love them equally doesn't mean treating them identically. It means responding to the unique needs of each one while maintaining the same intensity of love, the same dedication, the same availability. When I look back at our story, I see so many lessons about how to love, about how to forgive, about how to be forgiven, about how to live in family, be it our immediate family, the wider community, or the human family as a whole. But perhaps the most important lesson is this: that it's never too late to enter the party. You're never too far away to return home. You're never too good to need forgiveness. You're never too bad to receive it. Jacob had the courage to return, even though he believed he no longer deserved to be called a son. I had the courage to enter the party, even though my pride told me to stay outside in my righteousness. And we both discovered the same thing: that in our Father's heart there was room for both of us, that his joy wasn't complete until his family was reunited. And perhaps this is the essence of the story: that our Father, be it my earthly father, Abraham, or the heavenly Father that Rabbi Jesus spoke about, longs for the reunion of his family, that his joy won't be complete until all his children are home, those who have wandered far away, those who have physically stayed close but with their hearts far away, those who have lost themselves in vain pleasures, those who have lost themselves in self-righteousness. "Everything I have is yours," my father had said, and finally I understand what he meant. He wasn't just talking about land, sheep, or cattle. He was talking about his love, about his presence, about his joy. These had always been mine. I didn't have to earn them. I didn't have to deserve them. I just had to accept them, to enter the party, to enjoy the gift of being a son. Not a servant, not an employee, but a loved son, heir, integral part of the family. For anyone listening to this story, whether you identify with Jacob who wandered far away, or with me, who stayed but with resentment. I want you to know one thing. The door of the house is open. The fattened calf is prepared. The music is playing. The Father is waiting. All you have to do is return, to enter, to accept the gift that has been offered to you from the first day, but which perhaps you've ignored or taken for granted, the gift of being a child loved unconditionally. Because this is the true wonder of the story. Not that the Father accepted me, the perfect Son, or that he forgave Jacob, the imperfect son, but that he revealed to both of us the same truth, that we are not loved because we are good, but we are called to be good because we are loved. And in this love, free, generous, exuberant, we find not only forgiveness for the past, but also power for the future. The power to love as we have been loved, to forgive as we have been forgiven, to celebrate the return of each lost brother, be they stranger or relative, to invite each resentful brother to the joy of reconciliation. Because, ultimately, this is the party to which we are all invited, not an exclusive party only for the good or perfect, but a celebration of finding, of reconciliation, of restoration. A party where each of us, prodigal or faithful, wandered or stayed home, discovers the same wonderful thing, that we are loved not for what we have done or not done, but for who we are. Children of the Father, brothers and sisters to each other, family. And in this understanding, we find, finally, what we all seek, a place to belong, a place to call home. This is the end of my story, but perhaps the beginning of yours. Because, you see, the parable that Rabbi Jesus told was never just about two people from the past. It was about each of us in every moment when we choose to leave or to stay, to distance ourselves or to draw near, to judge or to love. The choices are ours, but the invitation remains the same. Come, son, our family is whole again. Let's rejoice together. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to share it with those who might need to hear it. Perhaps you know a prodigal son who needs to know that the road home is open. Or perhaps you know a faithful son who needs to know that the Father's constant presence is the greatest gift. Don't forget to like this video if it has brought you new perspectives. Leave a comment about which part of the story touched you most deeply. And subscribe to this channel for more biblical stories told from unexpected perspectives, which can help you see the scriptures in a new light and, most importantly, be open to the invitation that has always existed, the invitation to enter and enjoy the feast of the Father's love. Because no one, neither the prodigal nor the faithful, is excluded from his table. Peace to you and joy in the journey home.